Well, today we're continuing in our theme, and this is the last of our series. To remind you, our main theme has been, I believe even when. And we believe even when many things are not taking place. That's what this series is about. Today is less about I believe even when. Today is about illuminating our darkness with God's light. Illuminating our darkness with God's light. The scriptures that you're about to hear in a moment, I want to give a little introduction to both of these. The first one is the prophet Isaiah. The second one is John. Both of these scriptures are called incarnational scriptures. And what that simply means is that God becomes real to us, becomes flesh in Jesus Christ through these scriptures that are one prophesying and the other telling us about the reality of Jesus once he begins his ministry. So by incarnational, what our hope is today and always in worship is that Jesus becomes very real to us. Not just a real thought, but a reality in our daily lives, and that Christ is fleshy. One of the things I've often said is that I would not believe in God with the passion that I do if I truly believed that God did not understand how I felt, and if God could not relate to my challenges and troubles. And so the incarnation is vital, and that's what we celebrate at Christmas. Jesus, a God becoming humankind in Jesus Christ, which is the babe in the manger that is right behind me. So we're going to look at these two scriptures. The other thing I want to say as we get into those is that this is a real juxtaposition of light and dark. Light and dark. And Suzanne already alluded to that comparison of light and dark. It goes all the way through John specifically, but also is mentioned in the Isaiah passage today. But I want to mention something about that. We're talking about light and dark, not white and black. Often people misconstrue hearing about the light and the darkness and say, well, it's a white and black. Right now in our country, more than ever, we are not only sensitive, but we are passionate about helping people to understand that when God created the very first creation, it was light, not white. And that God created that light in the midst of our darkness. And so as we look at the imagery today and we hear about light and we hear about dark, I in no way want to misconstrue that we're talking about white and we're talking about black. That is not the experience at all. And so as we look at the way that they are against each other and there's some tension between the light and the dark, let us see it for what it is. And let us be mindful that God created light first so that we might see. So may God help us to see as we look at these two scriptures this morning. And another thing I would mention is that the people of the Bible, the indigenous people of the Bible and of the Middle East and of the land of the Bible where Jesus walked, where Moses came from, and Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, the indigenous people were people of color. And that's why it's very important also that we understand that we're saying light and dark, not white and black. Well, let's look at these two scriptures. I'm going to read the first one to you today, and this is from the book of Isaiah. And Isaiah is still talking to a captive people. And as he's addressing them, he's giving them hope. And that's what's so important about today. The candle of peace is one that gives us hope that we will experience peace. The Assyrian Empire was oppressing these people, and yet Isaiah says that it's going to change, and it's going to change incarnationally. Listen to these words, beginning in verse 2 of Isaiah chapter 9. The people walking in darkness, there's that image, have seen a great light. On those living in a pitch dark land, light has dawned. You have made the nation great. You have increased its joy. Listen to this hopefulness in the midst of oppression. They rejoice before you as with joy at the harvest, as those who divide plunder rejoice. As on the day of Midian, you've shattered the yoke that burdened them, the staff on their shoulders and the rod of their oppressor. It's all being lifted off because every boot of the thundering warriors and every garment rolled in blood will be burned, fuel for the fire. And now this integral part and this next line is the incarnation. A child is born to us. A son is given to us. And authority will be on his shoulders. He will be named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. There will be a vast authority and endless peace for David's throne and for his kingdom. establishing and sustaining it with justice and righteousness now and forever. What powerful words to say to an oppressed people, and being told, the Jews are being told that this oppression will end and the throne will come back to your people through David. We go to the Gospel of John. For all of you listening, but especially you kids listening today, I'm talking about the word light. And in this passage, there's just 14 verses, but there the word light is mentioned a number of times. I want you to listen, kids, and as I read this, see how many times you think I said the word light. Now, I'll tell you when I'm done reading, but I want you to count and see how many times you hear the word light. For all the rest of you, this is a powerful passage, again, that's incarnational. Hear these words. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word was with God in the beginning. Everything came into being through the Word, and without the Word, nothing came into being. Making it clear, the Word, the Logos, that's Jesus. What came into being through the Word was life. And here we go, kids, get ready. And the life was the light for all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness doesn't extinguish the light. A man named John was sent from God. He came as a witness to testify concerning the light, so that through him everyone would believe in the light. He himself wasn't the light, but his mission was to testify concerning the light. The true light that shines on all people was coming into the world. The light was in the world, and the world came into being through the light. But the Word didn't recognize the light. The light came to his own people, and his own people didn't welcome him. But those who did welcome him, those who believed in his name, he authorized to become God's children, born not from blood, nor from human desire or passion, but born from God. I'm going to pause before I go on this next part. I'm going to put my camera on gallery view, and I'm going to ask any kids that are out there that were listening to hold up the number of fingers or the number of how many times I said the word light. Anybody count when I said the word light? Oh, you're scrambling. They're looking. Okay. Okay. I'm seeing some fingers over here. All right. Oh, I see it's correct over there. Jessica Putney's house. Okay. They've got it. Let's see who else. Yep. Correct right there. Carol's house. Correct. Looking over here. All right. Yes. All right. Oh, I don't know. Hoffa and Griffin, I think you're off one. Very good. Yes. We have to add. Yes. Correct there in the Sexton family. And yes, Landon. Okay. So the answer is 12. The light is mentioned 12 times in that scripture. Now, as you listen to a passage like that, you can say, okay, I think we got it. But remember, the very first thing that God created was light. There's a reason that God created light first, because light was the conduit for the incarnation, because Jesus is light. And Jesus was with God in the beginning and came through as light. So as I pause for a minute about light and darkness, I just want to see this. Is there any other input in regards to those things, in regards to our children or families at this point?
One of the things that I want to encourage you kids and families to do this week sometime is to go to the darkest room of your house and talk about what it feels like to sit in the dark. And then to have a candle with you and light that candle and recognize how powerful just a small light can be. That a small light can illumine the faces of your family, even in a dark room. So that's one thing I want to encourage as you think about light and dark, kids, that one day you sit in a dark room and you light a small light and you see how powerful light really is.
Oh, that's wonderful. And please know that all during this today, anything you want to put in the chat to talk about light and darkness or experiences in your life, maybe something that you've had, we want to encourage you to do that. So please feel free. Well, we want to talk about two aspects of light now. Because remember, we're talking about illuminating, making bright light in our darkness. So one of the things that we want to talk about is light quenching. And the other one I want to talk about is illuminating light or light brightening. So the word quench is very interesting. It has two specific meanings. Quench can mean both satisfied. So like if you're very, very thirsty and you drink water or Gatorade, it quenches your thirst. That means to satisfy, to be full. But the other word for quench means extinguish, such as in a fireman that goes to a fire and uses his fireman's hose to put out a fire. That's extinguishing. That's called quenching also. I want to talk about the extinguishing aspect of quenching in my reference to light quenching. We need to be facing the facts that there are those experiences and people and events in our lives that feel as if they are trying to quench, extinguish our light. Biblically, we can look at those that tried to quench light. We can look at King Herod, who tried to quench the light of the incarnation of Jesus coming into the world by taking the life of all children, all young boys, 2 years old and younger. We can look at the village where Mary and Joseph were from and the light quenching experience as Mary was ostracized for being pregnant and getting ready to have a baby when she wasn't married and had not been with Joseph. And all the gossip and the hearsay behind it. Many of you can relate to the reality of those people that seem to get more joy out of talking about us than to us. We can look at the light quenching reality also as we get ostracized by others, that we don't feel a part of the group biblically, whether it be the leper or the lame. Those who did not have the gift of hearing or the gift of seeing were often ostracized. We call those light quenchers. Another way of quenching life comes with misguided folks. One specific that just happened last week, it was in Washington, D.C. There are a group of folks that were in the city that were promoting their agenda politically, and they're promoting their agenda racially. As they marched in Washington, D.C., they came upon two churches. One was an African Methodist Episcopal church. The other was a United Methodist Church, Asbury United Methodist Church. I was made aware of this event from some colleagues on that day, and I quickly got on social media and saw the video of this group of white people that had taken a sign from both churches and set it on fire and began chanting profanities. It really hit me hard because I thought, how would I feel if a group of people came by our own church experience, grabbed our church sign with our name on it, like our food pantry sign, or if we had a sign out front that said Black Lives Matter, and took that sign and set it on fire, chanting profanities as if that sign was offensive? That's a light quenching event. That day, my light was quenched a bit. It was extinguished a bit. And as I read the pastor's letter to his congregation and to all that would read it, it was heart-wrenching of the pain that caused, and yet of the forgiveness and grace that pastor and congregation had for those that had created this offense. There are light quenching things that happen when we intentionally seek to diminish one another. Now, I said intentionally. There are times we mistakenly say or do something and we don't realize that we have diminished or quenched someone else's light. But there are those times when we intentionally seek to make someone feel little about themselves. You boys and girls watching today, and teenagers for that matter, one of the things that we encounter is whether it be bullying or picking on us, people that make us feel bad about ourselves, they quench our light by calling us names. And finally, this happens to us. Our light starts to be quenched when we are alone and isolated. We have many people in our church, which is why we're Christmas caroling, doing other things that are very isolated. Many of you watching today, we haven't had a chance to see each other in person since March. That's 10 months. And during that time, we start to believe that our light, like the lights of these candles behind us that shine so brightly, we start to think that our light is being quenched. Well, it's not. That's why we need to go to this next level of light. In regards to that, please feel free in the chat today to lift up moments when you felt someone tried to extinguish your light. Put in that chat today those moments that you have witnessed firsthand on social media, on television, where you saw others trying to quench someone's light, and maybe how you feel about that. Well, let's talk about the hopefulness that leads us into our final part of the message today, and that is illuminating light. What are those experiences that cause us to have our light brightened? Well, it can happen when we reach out to others. When we reach out to others, it makes a difference in other people's lives because we reach out to them and it brightens their light. The vaccine has given us a hope and a brightening of light as we have hope that this virus will start to diminish. And we want to quench the virus, do we not? We don't want it to continue to grow. And light certainly brightens with Christ's birth and our renewed appreciation and understanding that comes with a reset of our priorities during challenging times. We have to reset our priorities during challenging times. John saw the light from prison. John the Baptist saw the light from prison when he asked the question, Jesus, are you who you say you are? And Jesus responded, look what's happening. The deaf can hear, the blind can see, the crippled can walk. Yeah, I'm the guy. Light was brightened for Simeon and Anna when they were at the temple. And when Jesus was brought to the temple to be dedicated at the temple that day, Simeon and Anna had the light of their life brightened. They had been waiting for the Messiah, the incarnation, the flesh, the baby, God, man. They'd been waiting for him a very long time. And as he was brought into the temple, they rejoiced. So now we give you an opportunity too to think about a couple of things in regards to light quenching and light illuminating. So here's one for you. And again, you can use the chat. We may hear from Linda and Suzanne and see what they have to say as well. But here's the question. How do we find peace and light now? In the darkness and the death and the restlessness that comes with a pandemic and the uncertainty and the unrest. How do we find peace in that? And I certainly have some ideas, but I'd like to hear from you in the chat and anyone else that wants to. How do we find peace in the midst of the darkness of the pandemic?
I like what the scripture says in John, where it says the darkness does not extinguish the light. And we often think that when there's something dark that the light is completely gone. But according to this, darkness never takes the light completely away. So it's always there. I think about, we used to do it at camp. We used to do these night hikes, and it's not as scary as it sounds, but we would take everybody out back to the trail with no flashlights. Nobody was allowed to bring a flashlight except for, we'd have one for an emergency. And we'd go back there and our leader would have us stand there and he'd have us just close our eyes for like 5 minutes. And then we'd open them up again. And it was amazing that we could walk through this trail from that point on without a flashlight, because you're being in that darkness, your eyes would refocus. I guess you could compare it to what like a cat's eyes do. Cats can see in the dark and their eyes get really big in the dark. But, and it makes you not afraid to walk through that darkness, because you know that you can, there's this refocus and that light is still there. So what's happening in our world today, we feel like we're in a darkness, but there's always that light that's not taking it away. Because you can always hear good things on the at the end of the news show. You can talk to friends and you can hear things that are good that are happening, that light is still there. And so we don't need to be afraid necessarily of what's happening, but we need to realize and be mindful that Christ's hope and love is always there, no matter how dark and how much we have to refocus, let's say that for that word, our own lives.
I really like that. I think it's a powerful metaphor, Linda, as well as a reality when you talk about refocusing, because that's exactly what we need to do. And like you talked about our eyes in the dark, we have to refocus our lives and priorities. We've had a couple of things said in the chat, and one is looking for the light in everyday life, the little things, trying to find that light. Another person says they have found light in humor. And humor is a huge thing. We need to remember to laugh and to enjoy and to have fun in the experiences that we have, so vital and so important. Well, another question would be, what gave us light before the vaccine came on the scene? So I want you to think back. It's been 10 months, folks. I want you to think back from March, April, May, June to the summer. What gave us light? And again, please let us know what gave you light prior to to the vaccine. The vaccine's giving us some hope. Not for everybody, I know that, but for many, many of us, it's giving us hope and light. What gave you light prior to the vaccine? Some of you may say, I don't know if I did. But anybody have any input on that one? What gave you light before the vaccine?
One thing that I've found out that families can do, this is a great exercise for families to do. We used to call it, what Suzanne would always share with you kids would be happies and whatever, slappies, I don't know what, highs and lows.
Happies and worries.
Happies and worries, all right. And this is kind of a takeoff on that. At this point where we are in our world, in our lives, in the holiday season, it's called griefs and gratitudes. So one, sit down with each other and name your griefs. What are your losses? And just put them out there, name them. And then the second thing is to put the light into that loss. What are your gratitudes? We've had this extended time to grow closer to our families that we haven't had previously because our worlds have been so busy. And so taking the time maybe during before a meal or whatever, or at a meal to name what your griefs and your gratitudes are in your family each night can help bring some of that light to the darkness, to the losses that you're feeling.
We see one here that says one of the griefs is not being able to give and receive hugs. That's a big one. Taking one's dog for a walk is a way to balance out some of those things. It's amazing the unconditional love of our pets. I appreciate that input, and I appreciate those of you that are sharing in chat. And I don't get to read them all quick enough, but thank you so much. I love that. A final piece about this is I would like you for a moment to imagine or to remember seeing a baby. Because Christmas is about the baby, right? The people of the time were very disappointed, many of them, that God came as a baby instead of a warrior. So I want you to think about a baby and what are the qualities that a baby possesses that brings about light, peace, that brings those positive experiences of God into our lives. I mean, this helpless live, what are those things that bring that about? So I open that up for the chat or anyone else that wants to share in regards to that. What are those things that a baby has? Pure unconditional love. Yes, very much so.
Another thing, maybe you don't have a baby in your home, but you have a pet. I know in our home, our dog recently had some minor surgery. So she's wearing the cone of shame. And when she walks around the corner, she just knocks into stuff. But it's amazing. You can put those on animals, and animals adapt so much better than humans do to life changes. You've probably all seen the videos of the three-legged dogs that don't let that stop them, and they hop, across to play. And so adapting and seeing what is pure in terms of continuing to choose life is an interesting lesson that we can learn from babies, from animals, from lots of things in nature.
And I'm seeing some of the things in the chat, a few of them, that the innocence has been lifted up, the unconditional love has been lifted up, total acceptance of others, and a quality I think that we often ignore that I feel is very positive in regards to a baby is total vulnerability. How many of us as adults will allow ourselves to be totally vulnerable with another? We certainly need to learn to be totally vulnerable with God. We need to find ways to be totally vulnerable with others. And that's something that a baby really shows us, the totality of what it means to be vulnerable, completely dependent, if you will, on others for your basic needs. Well, one other passage I just want to bring to the attention, to bring to the light, so to speak, is again in John. Excuse me, it's in John 3. Now, often when we go to John 3, we read John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave his only son, and so on and so forth. If you go a little bit further and you go down to John 19, it's all about light again. So I want to read a portion of this that it reminds us of the power of God who speaks to us through light and the ultimate light, which is Jesus, as we celebrate Advent and bring it to its conclusion. It simply says this. This is the verdict. I love that. Here's the verdict. This is John. Light has come into the world, but people love darkness instead of light. Now think about that. We'd rather be in the dark. We'd rather sit in the back. We'd rather be part of the crowd. We don't want to be in the light. But people, meaning humanity, loved darkness instead of the light. And so because of that, their deeds were evil because they were comfortable in the darkness. Everyone who does evil hates the light, right? You don't want to get caught? And will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. But here's the kicker, 21. But whoever lives by the truth comes into the light so that it may be seen plainly that what they have done has been done in the sight of God. There are probably too many folks that view God's watching over us as God watching us to cause us to stumble or to judge us. And yet this verse speaks to a different God, that is the God that I worship, is a God that is watching us, but is pleased by seeing us in the light. You know, we make mistakes, we screw up, we do all kinds of things, but we do that in the light and we let other people see that so that they understand it's not about being perfect. It's not about knowing everything to do during this time, during this challenge. It's not about knowing all the answers, for heaven's sakes. It's about being able to be vulnerable to God and being open to the light. And that's what Advent has been, about the coming of this baby, the incarnation, the becoming of flesh of this Messiah, the anointed one, Jesus, who brings light to us so that we no longer fear repercussions and judgment because God loves us that much. Well, we are in the midst of Advent and the advent of Christ right now. And more than ever, I think, we are beginning to understand light and peace in the midst of challenging experiences. And it's interesting, isn't it? We always have challenging experiences, but this pandemic has really made it more clear to us. So finally, I would say that it's no accident that God chose to create light first. So as we can let you know that as we conclude today, there's still more for you to experience, and that's called our point of connection. And our point of connection are those opportunities for you to continue to think about what we talked about today. And you'll see them on the screen as we share them. And those will also be posted on Facebook, so you're able to see those as well. But we want you to look at these and experience these and continue this week by being involved in the scriptures, being involved with others, being involved with thinking about light brightening and light quenching experiences, so that today is not just a one experience in vain. And I look forward to those of you that are able to come to our small gathering on Christmas Eve. I look forward to those that will listen to podcasts that night, those that will enjoy our wonderful Christmas music concert this afternoon. May you each have, because I probably won't get to see many of you, a most blessed Christmas. And know that the Christ of Christmas has come, that you are loved, and that God is present. Thank you again for coming so much.